Hello and welcome. We are back once again. Well, oh no,
I went the double-handed boog.
You went the double-handed
Oh, hardcore fade. My apologies. Come on. I got so excited. I was like, yes, music, let's go. No, not my job right now. Come on. Hi.
It's a tough gig you've got. It's a tough gig you've got. You got to turn the music down. You got to remember not to book too hard.
So complicated.
That's okay. That's all good. Hello and welcome. You are joining us live once again. Great to see a few people already in the chat. Hey, Gavin. Hey, Kim. Hey, Brendan. Great to see you guys.
Hey, Kim.
Thanks for supporting us with having a little week off. Well, we were off exploring parts of Thailand, which was very, very fun, but we are excited to be back.
Yes.
Very excited for today's episode. G'day, Ben. Good to see you as well. Let us know here if you are in the chat. Very excited for today's episode, Gabby. I don't want to waste too much time with fluff and waffle because we have quite too much to get through, actually. So do you want to give us a bit of a setup of what we're going to be doing today?
Sure. So in our brand new community, guys, which I have been loving, obviously Goose and I, we've been off for the last week and a half-ish, but still loving the community. Like I really stoked with what is happening in there. So if you haven't joined, I will chuck the link in the show notes as well for you to join us there because we have more ongoing conversation there. But because we have been on the road, we decided, you know what, this week we're just going to open it up and do an Ask Us Anything or an AMA. There are two of us, so it's not AUA. It doesn't sound as good. Ask Us Anything, put it out there.
Let me just say that it's not just because we've been on the road. It's not just because we've been on the road. We've been thinking about doing this for a while, though, right?
We have.
So it's not just like, we're traveling, so, you know.
No,
because we've actually had to put a whole bunch of time into thinking about these questions, thinking about the answers. So it's been exactly the same amount of prep required to do this episode. The whole idea of doing the Ask Us Anything episode was really to get some ideas of what people want to hear, like actually just to open up the conversation a little bit, because part of the reason we do this live is because we want to have time here with you. The reason we have a free community, which you can join, is because we want to have a place to be able to connect with you and for everyone to connect with each other. And so bringing questions and ideas to the table that aren't just the questions that we've conjugated in our own minds to go, oh, hey, here's the thing we want to talk about, is a great way for us to build the bridge of connection with the community and the content that we create. So that's how, certainly at least that's how I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's just before we jumped on here, Goose and I both said, I think we've got too much content.
Way too much.
Way too much, because we tried to prepare all of the questions that came through. I think there's
10.
We've got, I think there's 11. Maybe 12. There's 11.
No,
anyway.
Yeah, there's 11 questions. You're right.
Blown away with the level of questions, honestly, because we just kind of put it out there with this kind of stuff. You got no idea what's going to come back. But all of our community are bloody amazing and have come up with some really cool questions to fuel the rest of this conversation. So we're going to do our best to try and work through it. Goose is pretty convinced we're not going to get through it. Considering
we're definitely not going to get through all 11 questions. That's wild. I mean, we'll give it a red hot go. Let's give it a red hot go. And by the way, as Gabby mentioned, so these questions have come directly from you guys in the community. If you're not yet in the community, there is a link in the description of the show notes for you to join. Join us there. It is free. It is a space to connect with other people, like-minded individuals, all kind of on a quest on a quest for freedom, choice, and abundance. It's a great space, and there's lots of great stuff going on in there. So, Gabby, let's get stuck into it. What's the first question?
Cool. We've tried to also group these questions, so we'll see. There's an order just because of the grouping, so we'll see where we get to. But we're going to start with some personal philosophy questions for you and I, which I think is a cool place to start. And then later, there's questions about like macro and the future of money and investment strategies, and then business and purpose and all kinds of good stuff. So first question is from Olivia. Hang on. Cooked it already.
Live TV.
It's what happens when you don't look at a screen for a little while. Yes. Okay. Beautiful. Okay. Question from Olivia. When does one know it's enough? Enough wealth to try something new in life, enough lack of freedom to leave Australia for another country due to a forced communist society. Olivia's words, not mine. Thank you, Liv.
So
Goose.
provocative.
Do you wanna
Yeah.
kick this
I
off?
really want to. I really want to
I
tackle this
feel
one
like
because
you want to tackle this.
yeah. This is because this is a really important question, because the question here is framed as a material question, as a like, when would I have enough money, or like, how do I know when I've got enough money to be able to go and have the freedom that I truly desire? How do like, and the question is not actually about that. It's a fundamental question about happiness and purpose and meaning, not actually a question about money, because what you're really asking is, when can I give myself permission to live the life that I want? And if you're asking yourself, like, when is enough enough? I mean, that's an unanswerable question, because it necessarily implies that there is a certain value whereby you would be satisfied or fulfilled, i.e., that there's a cup that needs to be filled up to a certain volume, at which point you will be able to have the things that you want and desire. And I think that fundamentally that question is a little bit flawed, because it kind of presupposes that the filling of ourselves can come from external sources and forces, right? And that's not true, because if you asked yourself the question of like, how much money would I need to move to another country? Well, you don't really need much money at all. Maybe $2,000, maybe, I don't know, maybe even less if you really got pretty spicy about it. How much money would you need to sail the world? Well, you could get a crewing job on a yacht, and you could actually get paid to do it, or do it for free, right? And so you would be able to sail the world on yachts. And how much money do I need to be happy? Well, okay, well, money is not actually going to give you any happiness. Money is an accelerant that can allow you to buy things, but it's not actually going to give you happiness. And so the idea here that there's something to be filled to a completeness, I think, is really the idea that I want to tackle. I actually got some props for this one, right?
You have props?
So, I have props.
You have secret props.
I have secret props, Gabby.
Okay. So for our audio listeners, he is holding a mug.
I'm going to be don't just let me go, because I'm going to be holding more mugs, right? So the idea of like, when is enough enough, right, is the idea that you can fill something up, fill up yourself to a point that you would then be full. But the whole idea is that there is an inside that is hollow, that you're trying to fill with something from the outside. But in fact, if you look at this cup, what you'll actually recognize and start to realize is there is no inside and there is no outside, because this edge here you would call the outside. But if I just follow my finger all the way along it, you will see that it is the same edge that goes all the way through. And so it is not, the inside is not the inside. The inside is still the outside. It is just a different part of the outside. And so the idea that we have a void that needs to be filled is a fallacy, because you would say that the water would fill inside this cup. However, if you were to see water on a leaf after there'd just been some rain, you wouldn't say that the leaf is full of water. You would say that there is water on the leaf, on the outside of the leaf. And so necessarily, we are not a thing that can be filled up. We are an already full being that is seeking meaning in the environment around us. And the question of how much, let's say that you did want to, put water on the outside of the cup in this section. Well, then the amount of water that's required to fill this cup on the outside in this way is a lot different to the amount of water that is required to fill this one, which is much smaller. And so the question of like, how much water do I need to fill the cup? Well, it's like, well, what size is the cup? And in fact, what are you actually filling it with? Or are you just putting water on the cup? And in this example with your life, are you putting money on yourself? Are you putting money on your life? And if so, what is the money that you're putting on your life, and why? And what are you seeking to achieve by doing so? Because there is no... Now, let me be very clear. More money allows you to solve more money problems. More money allows you to buy more things. More money may allow you to enjoy things that you couldn't enjoy with less money. But that doesn't mean that money equals happiness. That doesn't mean that money necessarily equals choice, because most of the choice is already formed in your mind. It's just about what are your preferences. Because you might say, oh, well, that's all well and good, right? But I don't want to live on 2-minute noodles. Okay, well, that's just really your preference, right? Like, so if what you're saying is your preference in life is you only eat organic grass-fed steaks, well, then that will cost a certain amount of money, but
Mm-hmm.
that's a preference. So then you can allow money to satisfy a preference that you have in life. If you said, because you could very easily move to another country, right? I actually did a bit of research on this, and I said, well, how much would it cost to retire for a single person in India, Vietnam, Greece, Thailand, Colombia, or Mexico? And the budget reference that I used was a 2-bedroom mid-range apartment in a non-premium district of a medium-sized city, so not the capital city. Utilities, internet and phone, eating out at local restaurants for most meals, scooter or motorbike rental, a gym membership, basic health insurance, essential incidentals and some discretionary spending, and a two-week modest international trip. Two modest 2-week annual international trips. So 2 holidays a year for 2 weeks. Now, that kind of covers a lot of things. That covers food and shelter, utilities, connection, fitness, health, all of this kind of stuff. Now, in India, you could get away in Australian dollar terms with $11,250. You could live on that and fulfilling those needs. Mm-hmm. Vietnam, 26,000, Greece, 32,300, Thailand, 28,000, Colombia in South America, 20,200, and Mexico, 33,400. Add 50% if there's 2 of you. And so the question then is, well, okay, well, why wouldn't you do that? Because the cost of living in Australia may be double that, right? So instead of being $33,400 in Mexico, it might be $70,000 in Australia to achieve a similar standard of living. Now, you might say, okay, well, that's fine. So I could live in India for, say, 12 grand a year, but I don't want to. Well, then that's just a preference, right? That's just a preference choice. Or, okay, I could fly to Europe on, some budget cheap ass airline and take 72 hours to get there. But I don't want to because that's not my preference. I prefer a more premium one. I want one that's going to get there in 2 stops, or I want to fly business. Well, that's all just preferences. So then the question is really about, to what degree are your preferences informing your perceived freedom and your ability to feel like you have enough? And so, you don't actually need I'll say it again, like if you're looking for an external number to help you to decide when you're going to achieve a fulfillment, i.e. your cup will be filled, even though you can't actually fill the cup is all outsides, right? Just as you are. Then I think you're looking in the wrong place, because the question here is, when does one know it's enough wealth to try something new in life, enough freedom to leave Australia for another country? And so, in fact, what that is permission and preferences. Mm-hmm. When do I feel like I will have satisfied, either for myself or for the opinions of others, that I've achieved enough in life that I now have the permission, or I can give myself the permission to go and do the thing that I really want to do, or give myself permission to stop the thing that I'm currently doing, or give myself permission to experiment and test and try? That's the real question in there. Because again, you can, and I have done it, by the way. So I traveled, I went to Ethiopia, and I spent 3 months in Ethiopia. And the first month and a half I traveled by myself. I had very little money at the time. It took me 72 hours on a flight. That's why I mentioned 72 a second ago. It took me 72 hours on a flight to get to Addis Ababa, because I connected all of the cheapest flights that I could find. I can't remember what my daily budget was, but I was looking for hotels for $1 a night. I think on average I was spending about $3 a night on hotels. I was catching local buses and local transport, and I traveled for a month and a half by myself, and I saw the whole country. Right. And so, you can do it on very modest means. Mm-hmm. And so it's really just a question about what is holding you back, or in fact, how would you define success and happiness and fulfillment? And rather than seeking external indicators of this, like how much wealth do I need, how much money do I need, how much is enough, what you should actually be seeking to identify is, how am I vibrating? On what level am I vibrating, with what and with whom, and how and why? Because you will find, if you really just listen and take the time to slow down and think about it, that the moments where you feel the most joy, the moments where you feel the most satisfaction, the moments where you feel the most fulfillment and the most happiness, is when you're vibrating at the frequency of your values. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, for me, as most of you would know, freedom is a very big part of that for me, a very big high value for me. And the way that freedom and curiosity are two very, very, very high values for me. And the way that one of the ways that expresses itself is my desire to travel and see the world. Now, we can travel on a motorbike around all over the place. Now, I want a $30,000 motorbike, but I don't need a $30,000 motorbike.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I could probably get away with a $2,000 motorbike and do just fine. Right. And so these ideas that there's sort of some number that you need to get to is a little bit, a little bit broken. Right. And it's mostly just giving yourself permission to go and do what you want to do. Now, that being said, let us look at some numbers together, because I put together this calculator. I mentioned it in the last episode we did. And I'm going to share my screen now, Gabby. And guys, I will share this in the community after this. I had to do a couple of little tweaks on it. I didn't get to it until just now. So you can actually calculate, if you want, a sort of a freedom number. Now, I set this up as the Die with Zero retirement calculator based on the conversation we were having last week, where, in fact, most people aren't thinking about the fact that they can spend the principal as well. This calculator is set up over 75 years. So you can see year 1 is 2026 and year 75 is 2100. Okay, so it's a 75-year calculator, and you can look at it through two different vectors. You can either look at it through how much capital would I need, and how much would the annual rate of return, ARR, annual rate of return, need to be. You could change that to CAGR. I don't really care. It doesn't really matter. And do you want to use a withdrawal rate method, i.e. you will withdraw 4% of those funds or higher, like, pick your number. What do you want to do here? 4% is the typical rate. And then how much money would that give you to spend? So you can either look at it through the withdrawal rate model and go, okay, well, how much money would I need in order to be able to be free? Now, let's just look at this model for example. Now, if we were to use the example of Mexico, right? Well, let's just say about $30,000 is what you would need to be able to move overseas, live a modest lifestyle, and have all of the time freedom in the world. $30,000 a year is $30,000 a year divided by 12. That's $2,500 a month, which actually sounds about right based on, like that'll get you a good life in Vietnam as well. So if you only needed $2,500 a month, right? If you had $1 million in capital saved up, you'd already be at $3,333. And that is with a withdrawal rate of 4% and with an annual growth rate of 10% on your capital. If you did that, you would never run out of money. Now, what this first model doesn't account for is inflation, okay? And so you may find that you would need to adjust how you live over time, but you can also do that just fine as well, okay? So you can look at it through that lens. You could also increase the returns. Maybe you believe that you're going to get 20%. Now, this model doesn't factor in taxes, but it is still a useful way to think about it. Maybe you're going to get a 20% return per annum. Maybe that's your target return, and maybe you're going to get more than that, and maybe you're going to get less than that, maybe you get an average of that, and maybe you only withdraw 4, in which case maybe you've already got enough. Maybe you already have enough to be able to just retire, and by the time you get to 2064, you're living on $938,000 a month based on this. Okay. Now, the other way to think about this would be through a monthly budget, right? And that would be to say that, let's just move that back to 10% ARR. That would be to say that, okay, well, what if I said my monthly budget was $3,500? Now, you can travel the world, by the way, on $3,500. You can not work. You can stop work, right? Now, maybe it's a little different if you've got kids and stuff like that, right? But as for a single individual, now you just need to adjust this to your own circumstances. But if you're a single individual, you can absolutely travel the world on $3,500 a month. Now, in this version you set the monthly budget and then you set a monthly inflation rate or an annual inflation rate, right? And so this basically then calculates that going up. Now, let's say it's 5% annual inflation. Doesn't really matter. If you had $1 million appreciating at 10%, and you had a $3,500 monthly budget, you would also find that you wouldn't run out of money. Now, let's just change this down to like $200,000, just for the point of the discussion. you can see that if you had $200,000, then you would run out of money after a few years. But this could give you a few years to actually go and find the next thing for you. And so the purpose of this calculator is actually to help show people that you don't need as much money as you think you do. Most of the constraints that we have in the way that we think about all of this kind of stuff is preferences. I would prefer to live in Sydney, or I would prefer to drive a specific type of car. But if you had this idea that like some specific type of car is inherently going to give you happiness, then I think you are sorely mistaken. Now, you may find pleasure, hedonic, you may find hedonic, signaling and hedonic pleasure through the act of driving a specific car. Maybe you can appreciate its engineering and its manufacturing, or maybe it's purely status, in which case it's got nothing to do with the car anyway, right? But as it sits in your garage, unused when you are not driving it, it is specifically not giving you any happiness, right? It is just sitting there. It is doing nothing. And so you can infer from that the things that you can buy are not going to give you more of what you want if the goal is fulfillment. Happiness is an inside job. And so back to Liv's question, which was, how does one know when it's enough? Well, it's enough when you want to decide to do something different. That is effectively it. Because you don't need a certain amount of money. You don't need anything other than a desire to have a different set of parameters with which you live your life. That is all.
I love it.
Thoughts?
Yeah, it's like similar thoughts to you. I think the notion of aligning with your values, like I think everything just comes back to values. And so like Olivia, I know you and I know you have similar values to us in terms of freedom and curiosity and impact, and freedom specifically in this situation. How does your life, the way that you're living and where you are living, how does that align with your value of freedom? Because I think if you're asking the question, you already know the answer. I think, and to Goose, your point about permission, I think there's an element there where we put so much pressure on ourselves to achieve this certain life that we think we are capable of. And so when things change, we don't really allow ourselves to just change, because we put the pressure on like, no, I'm a successful person, and so I need to grind until I get to X point. When if you really just sit with it and just question, what do I actually care about, and am I living in alignment with that, it should come through pretty clearly of yes or no. And that's the point at which you need to make that decision, I think, rather than waiting. Because as we keep saying, we only have one life. So the longer that you wait being out of alignment with what you really truly care about, that's just time on this planet that you're wasting. So
yep. And also, I think it's okay for things to change. Right. So let's say that you go on a quest, a money-making quest, right? Let's say that you're like, right, cool. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go and make a bunch of money, right? I'm going to go build a business. I'm going to invest. I'm going to go on this money-making quest, and I'm going to do that. That is okay. That is okay. Just in the same way that deciding to go and trek the Annapurnas for 1 month is a journey that you want to go on. That is okay in the same way that deciding to have children is a journey that you want to go on. That is okay. But you also have permission for that to not be the defining characteristic of you for the rest of your life. It can be a journey that you go on for a part of your life. And the thing is, like, we have these ideas that we have that there has to be this permanence, right? But in fact, the most beautiful music that you'll ever listen to has texture and shape and changes. It is not the same sound all the way through the song. It is, in fact, it's the variations in the tune that actually give you the movement that you're seeking. And so it is okay for you to go on a journey for a portion of your life, and then it is okay to go on a different journey for a portion of your life. And then it's even okay to go back to that other journey. If you go, you know what, I actually really liked that money-making journey that I was on, and I want to go do that because that was fun and I enjoyed it. And actually, maybe I just needed a break from it, or maybe not. But I think where people get stuck is that they they put themselves inside a box and they say, this is who I am. This is what I need to do. These are the constructs that I'm going to define my own personal success by. And they forget that everything is a choice. And they forget that, everything is a dance and we're supposed to be dancing to the music, right? And so, yeah, I would encourage everyone to really take stock and kind of think about that. And by the way, like, let me just be really clear. Maybe it is just in the same way that the idea of climbing a mountain to get to the top of the mountain, that is the objective of climbing a mountain, is to get to the top. And then you climb down. Like, that's it. It's just get to the top of the mountain. It is okay for that to be a quest that you're on. Maybe that's in your career, or maybe you started a business and you're like, you know what? I want to know what it's like to get to a $10 million revenue business. I want to know what it's like to climb that mountain. And, when people climb Mount Everest, they go through a whole section called the death zone, right? Where, like, it's not fun. People are dying. You're literally climbing over dead people, climbing to the top of Everest. It's not fun. You're not doing it because it's fun. You're doing it because you want to know if you can get to the top of the mountain, and you want to know what that experience feels like. And that's okay. And maybe it's the same in your career. Maybe in your career, you're like, I want to know what it's like to take this as far as I can take it. And that's okay. Just work that out. But it doesn't need to be the thing that then defines your entire life, to the point that you also forget about the other things that are going to bring you joy and fulfillment in this earthly experience that we have. So
beautiful.
Awesome. Sweet.
Cool.
So we are 26 minutes in, and we're 27 minutes in, and we've answered the first question, Gabby. So I think that we're going to struggle to get through 10 or 11.
It's going well. We'll see how we go. I guess if we scroll to Mongoose and you think we could probably do like another episode on it, we just skip that one and then come back, I guess.
I actually meant to leave some comments on ones that I think that we could do. Anyway, let's go to the next one, and I'll have a little think about that. By the way, before you do that, Gabby, guys, if you're here in the chat, let us know. Interact with us in the chat. Let us know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What are your thoughts? Let's get the conversation going. Gabby, what is the next question that you want to tackle?
Beautiful. So, question from Braden. He said, I'm going to be greedy and ask another one because he does have another question later. Rearrange them. But in today's society, business or personal, what are you most fearful of? And do you have a plan to work through the fear?
Do you want to answer this one first, Gabby?
So, yeah, I can go first. So honest answer from me in terms of biggest fear, when I think about just, everything that we kind of talk about on this podcast with this community around the changes that are happening in the world, my biggest fear is just how my family and friends will transition over the next few years. I always feel like a very immense sense of responsibility and care for people. And I honestly thought that one day I would be this like really like fuck off level of wealthy that I could just take care of everyone that I care about, and that would be fine. Like I would just be like, we go through this process of building a business, creating wealth, investing, and I thought I'd be this like massive level of wealth that like you can just turn around and just share that with all the people you care about. We're not quite at that level yet. And so as we kind of move through the next few years, I feel fear around like being able to bring the people that I care about with me. So I'm managing that, I guess, by trying to just have as many conversations as I can and educate as many people in my life as I can. Obviously, like through this podcast, being able to create this content, it's also helpful to then bring that through to sharing that with people in my world as well. But everyone has their own constraints as well. Like, we did an episode on this kind of topic a couple of weeks ago about how to help everyone I can't remember what we called it, but how to help everyone basically in the next few years so that they can come along with you. Everyone still has their own constraints. Like a lot of people still, in this community we talk pretty easily about money and investing, but for a lot of people, they still hear the word money and they're like shiver. Like people just don't like talking about money. People have a lot of hang-ups about wealth and stories, and I think just remembering that as well, that it's quite a gap I think for a lot of people still in my life, despite, we've created this business that helps people to create wealth. And so there's still a gap there for me that I'm honestly quite fearful about. How I'm working through that was the other part. Do you have a plan to work through the fear? Um, it sounds counterintuitive, but actually spending more time alone. And I find that the more time I spend alone, just sitting with the feelings, the more okay I feel. And I think I've just noticed that it's helpful for me to just sit with these kind of fears. And so whether that's you feel a similar fear, or if there's any other fear that you are feeling, just sitting kind of alone with it and realizing that we kind of have a choice about how we feel about things. So I'm processing a lot of fear-based stuff at the moment and kind of realizing that there's so much more trust we can have in the whole process and just what is happening in the world and our experience on this planet. We can just have a lot more trust and we can choose trust over fear, because I'm not sure you can have both the same. I'm not sure you can feel fear and trust at the same time. I think they're opposite feelings. So being able to just like sit and clear that out, whether that's journaling, I find journaling helps a lot. But also it's kind of like going back to permission. I think permission is such an ego-based thing because we want to feel allowed to do something because it just helps us to feel okay with it, whereas we don't really need to have permission for anything. And so again, having trust that I'm going to do my best. I'm still going to talk to as many people as I can and try and educate them. But at the end of the day, they're on their journey. I'm on my journey. Everyone's going to make their own choices. And so this is kind of, it's funny, however many years into the business that we are, but it's like business in itself is a personal development journey. And so you constantly still come across these things of like, still going to work through that, still going to work through that. I think we all have these things that we just need to work through. So that's my kind of long answer there about my fears. I think, I think journaling, as generic as that advice can sound, but I think it really helps a lot for me.
I think that's really good. I think what you said there about trust and fear being opposite, I think is really really valuable. It's really, really, really valuable. Because the way that I think about it is fear is a response to a lack of fear is a response to a lack of understanding or a lack of willingness to accept things as they are. Because if I took you out on a boat and I took you 100 kilometers out into the deep, dark, open ocean and I said, jump off, anyone would be like, no way, I don't know what's down there.
Yeah.
But if you could see through the ocean, right? If it was crystal clear and you could see all the way to the floor of the ocean and you could see everything that was there, you would have way less fear. You'd be like, oh, like I was always scared of swimming out into deep water, but then I started scuba diving and as soon as I could get down under the water and look around, I was like, this is great. It's perfect. So it's a case of understanding or a lack of willingness to accept things as they are, because your fear can be actually a manifestation of your lack of faith that things should be the way they are, or like a resistance that you want things to be different, right? And so you feel a certain way. So it's resistance and a lack of understanding. And so if you can realize that everything is exactly as it should be, then there is nothing to fear. You talk about like the next few years, and the question is, in today's society, business or personal, basically it's kind of like how with the way the world is today, plus the direction the world is going, what are we most fearful of? And to be honest, a big part of the reason that I spend a lot of time thinking about where are we going and how is the world going to change is because that allows me to solve for the lack of understanding. That gives me a point of view to be able to be like, okay, cool. Like this is coming and that's fine. I can learn to accept that is like through understanding, I can create acceptance. Because you're not in control. Like I can't turn AI off. I can't change the seasons. I can't, I can't do any of that kind of stuff. All I can choose is my response. In between stimulus and response, we have a choice. And so my ability to think about all of these kind of things gives me an ability to appreciate what is accept what is coming, and to not have fear. So I don't have any fear. I don't have any fear about, genuinely, this is not a, I don't have any fear about the current state of the world. I don't have any fear about where the world is going. We are all a product of our choices. And so there are, there are people that we care about and things that we want to do and all these kind of things. And some of the things that we may want, i.e. preferences, we may not be able to have. And that may be a byproduct of the choices that we've made. So, for example, my dad has a disability, and, we don't live close. And we're probably not going to live close. It's not like when he gets older that we're going to suddenly move back. And we have to. That's something that we need to contend with, right? And so you have to just accept things for as they are, which he has done himself, which is why I'm comfortable to talk about it. I've spoken to him about it. He's got full acceptance of his journey that he's on, and I'm like, wow, that is so powerful, because very few people actually develop that level of acceptance. He's like, no, it's cool. I know what journey I'm on, and I'm on that journey. It's like, wow, rock and roll, man. Cool. Good on you. Like, because it's so big, because most people never develop that acceptance. And he's cool with it. He's cool with the path that he's on. So I'm like, all right, man, rock and roll. It's your choice. There's a glacier in the Congo, which, would you believe it or not, there's a glacier in the Congo. Like, what the hell? It's the most bizarre thing I've ever heard of. It's called the Rwenzori Glacier. And I really want to see the Rwenzori Glacier. And we might not ever get there before it melts. And that'll be a byproduct of choice, right? And so, there are 20 Irrawaddy dolphins left in the Mekong. And I really want to see the Irrawaddy dolphins before there are none, right? And so the choices we make dictate the life that we have. And so choices to work longer, to accrete more money, choices to work less amount of time, to accrete less money, but have more freedom. And all of these things ladder up to the way that we get to experience the world. And I don't think any of it should be based around fear. It should just be based around like developing an understanding and working through that. So I think the only thing that sort of drives me with a sense of urgency, not fear, but like just the kind of like a powerful sort of sense of, that I need to act, which is not driven, which is often how people would categorize fear. Like, I'm afraid of X, so I need to Y. It's not fear based, but it's just really the recognition that we only have one life. We only have one life, and everyone, the only obligation you have is to live your life fully in line with your values. That's it. There's nothing else. If you can vibrate on the frequency of your values, you will have lived a good life. That's it. That is it. That's all we really need to do. And so for me, I just want to make sure that I do that. But the way that I can do that as well is just by appreciating the things that I have more, understanding that the things that I have are already the things that I have everything I need. so like, if it all blew up tomorrow, then great. It's fine. It's all good. So the process of working through the fear is really a process of actually, opening yourself up to gratitude, because you don't need anything. People in your life are going to die, but they're going to die anyway. Like, they've always died. People die. That's fine. That happens. Things that you once loved will cease to be. That happens all the time. That's progress. Things that you wanted to do will at some point not be available to you. That is also part of life. That happens. And so life is a process of experiencing loss. But if you have gratitude for what you have and what you have experienced, then you can counteract that. And so through the combination of seeking to understand, so I don't need to be afraid, and through constantly trying to find new ways to be grateful for the things that we have, that's how I work through all of that. That's how I kind of navigate through fear.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Cool.
And Brayden is just here in the chat as well. He's also just asked
Hey, Brayden.
So actually, let me just one other just quick, and this is a Taoist phraseology, and it is one of my favorites, and it kind of goes to your point here. So Braden's just put it here in the chat. I also asked this question based on your mantra to yourself: Who would I be? Who would I be if I lived a life with no fear? The actual completeness of that is lived a life with no fear and no doubt. Who would I be without fear and doubt? Who would I be if I had no fear and if I had no doubt? Right. So that's the question. If you can live a life free of fear and doubt, then you will actually realize that you already are everything that you ever needed to be. But the Taoist phraseology that I really love is those who flow as the universe flows know that they need no other force. And so if you can, vibrate and flow, then you don't need to be worried about anything, and everything will happen. Everything's already going to happen. So just flow. Don't be afraid. Let go, trust, have faith, and just experience for whatever it is. Because every single thing is beautiful, even the painful stuff, even the scary stuff, even the painful stuff. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's what gives the dish its flavor, right? So enjoy it.
Yeah, the like that Wayne Dyer concept of who would I be without fear or doubt? That was yesterday. We rode back. It was a 3 and a bit hour motorbike ride back from Karabi yesterday. Be on the back of the motorbike, and I typically, and I don't know if it's a feminine thing, but like bikes, I love being on the bike, but there's still an element of like fear that usually comes over me. And it was actually playing through my head while we were on the bike yesterday. It was like, who would I be without fear or doubt? And so I chose that whole trip to be like, I don't feel scared. And it was beautiful.
Super interesting, because you mentioned several times how much you were enjoying that motorbike ride.
Yeah. And so it's consciously saying, what if I didn't have any fear right now? Because there's, you're on highways, there's people, Thai drivers are crazy, so they overtake you, and I'm not in control, right? I'm sitting on the back of the bike, and I trust you completely. And I just trusted the whole experience, and it was beautiful.
Yeah. I think once you can let go and just accept, that's when you can find peace. And if you have peace, then you don't have fear. All right. I'm going to suggest that we shift gears a little bit, because rather than tackling question 11, why don't we shift gear to some of the macro stuff? Like Matthew asked a really great question around gold, which I think is good. I'm just mindful of time, so there's going to be a few.
Yeah,
there's going to be a few pieces in here.
All right.
So I think let's hit Matthew's question. Let's hit Rachel's question as well. I think that's a really good one, and then we'll see how we're going for time.
All right. Am I reading this out? Do you want to read it out?
I can read it out. Matthew said, with individual sovereignty being one of your highest values, why does gold/silver not come into consideration for you, given its track record over the past 5,000 years, and it's still being considered by many as the only real money out there? Reserve banks around the world are repatriating gold like there's no tomorrow, arguably preparing for the inevitable monetary reset, as has been repeated in history time and time again. Does it have a place in your portfolio? And I think that is such a great question. And I'm gonna dig into this. I spent a bit of time thinking about this question. I spent a bit of time thinking about all these questions, actually. So it's been really fun. So yes, governments are repatriating gold. So you can go look at there's a whole bunch of data you can get on that. Countries are repatriating gold like there's no tomorrow. It's a correct observation. The question is why? And the answer that I've got, and everything is just my opinion, so you don't have to agree with me, whatever, that's fine. It is so that they can create a stronger currency, i.e. a gold-backed currency, right? So they can create a position where they no longer need to rely on the US dollar, and where they can give their currency more credibility by saying that it is backed by gold. So they have a certain amount of gold reserves and all of that kind of stuff. But that's still implies that they have a gold-backed currency, which is still a paper money that relies on trust. It's basically saying like, hey guys, you can trust our money, you can trust our currency, because we've got a big pile of rocks over here, and we're telling you that the amount of bits of paper we've got are equal to the amount of rocks that we've got sitting in a big cave, right? So it's kind of like fiat premium, right? Because what countries that are stockpiling gold are almost certainly not going to do is start to introduce gold as the primary currency in and of itself, i.e. the medium of exchange. They almost certainly won't do that. And now that doesn't mean that some large international settlements won't happen in gold, but for a currency, like for example, let's say China is not going to ditch the yuan and then tell everyone to start transacting in gold. It's not going to happen. It just won't happen because the system is not built in a way that can support that. And part of the reason for that is because of the characteristics that gold doesn't have, which is, things like it's not easily divisible, it's not easily transportable, it's not easily, it's hard to transport, hard to verify, it's not easily divisible, and not very portable. That is, in fact, why paper currencies existed, paper gold-backed currencies existed in the first place, is because it worked for a while, but then it became impractical for global trade, right? So it's not practical to ship gold around all of the time. And also it's very hard to verify. A lot of gold that exists in reserves is not verified very well, because the only way to verify it is to melt down the bullion and to recast it. That's very expensive to do. Like, it's the only way to actually verify the purity of it is to melt it down and recast it. And that's a very hard thing to do. And so whilst you may have a whole bunch of governments repatriating gold and building up their gold reserves and doing all of that kind of stuff, I believe that is effectively to create what I'll call fiat premium, right? It's like, rather than a non-gold backed, hey, it's just pure, like, hey, it's just money printing, shut up and take our money. It's kind of like, trust us that this paper money is worth something because we have a bunch of rocks sitting in a cave over here, right? So it's kind of like fiat premium, but it's still a centralized paper currency system. And again, that's because fiat is, that's because gold is very hard to transport, it's very hard to verify, it's not easily divisible, it's not very portable. So yes, it does have a 5,000 year history of being the best money, but horses also had a several thousand year history of being the best transport and the best industrial aid. And then we've got planes, trains, automobiles, and tractors. And I find that that's a very interesting way to think about it, because, the horses didn't become worse horses. The horses were still just as good. It's not like horses started to lose limbs, but a better technology came along. And so what's really interesting here is in about the year 1900, the US had over 21 million horses and only 4,000 cars. By 1915, the automobile industry overtook the carriage industry. By the 1920s, motor vehicles surpassed horses in numbers. I'll get to those numbers in seconds. And carriage companies plummeted from 4,600 in 1914 to less than 90 by 1929. In 1925, there were about 22 million horses and 20 million cars. And by 1930, that had shifted to approximately 26.3 million cars versus 18 million horses, right? Which is super interesting, right? Because the horses didn't become less good; they just got surpassed by a better technology. And so I like gold. I think gold is good, right? But I think it is an outdated technology. Now, the other interesting thing about gold is that gold has very broadly maintained the same purchasing power parity over a very long period of time. So it buys you basically the same today as it did in 1000 AD. 1 ounce of gold buys you about roughly the same amount of bushels of wheat. It buys you, in fact, let me just bring up a comparison. I did some research on this. So in 1000 AD, 1 ounce of gold could typically buy an entire high quality outfit, or a suit in local terms, meaning clothing suitable for a person of status, along with a belt and shoes. In broader terms, it could also cover a significant portion of a family's annual expense, or even buy a working animal like a trained horse or several pigs, yada, 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 right? In 1500 AD, the value of gold in terms of daily necessities and lifestyle hadn't changed. 1 ounce of gold could still buy high quality clothing, fine suit, belt and shoes, and potentially a little bit more. In 2025, gold still trades. Despite inflation and lifestyle shifts, an ounce still buys a high quality tailored suit with accessories, several high-end dinners, a premium smartphone, right? So it's a great store of value, right? And that is great, and that is all well and good. But I'm not looking to just store value. I'm looking to expand value, right? So I want to make my money make money, not just carry my money through into the future. And so I think gold is good. but it is not as good at making money as other things. And because of its constraints around things like portability, verifiability, divisibility, all of that kind of stuff, like the only way that I would own gold is I would never own paper gold. As in, like, I would never buy a gold ETF or something. I would only ever buy physical gold because that's the only way that it can make sense. And I would want to buy physical verified gold, and I'd want to store it in a vault. Now, that necessarily starts to introduce some problems. Where is the vault going to be? Are we going to keep it in our house? Maybe. But how much gold can you keep in your house? Could you keep $1 million of gold sitting in safe in your house? Or would you want to put that in a bank in Singapore or something like that, which is what a lot of people do? And then if we've got $1 million worth of gold sitting in a bank in Singapore, then if we want the gold for some reason, we've got to go to Singapore, go and get the gold. And then if like you can't grab your gold and go and get on a plane and fly somewhere else with $1 million worth of gold. You can't do it. They'll confiscate it because of capital controls. So it's not very portable. And then let's say you did go get $1 million worth of gold out of your safe, out of your safety deposit box or vault or whatever in Singapore. What are you going to do with it? Because last I checked, I haven't been to a restaurant where they accept gold as a currency. So it's not actually usable. Now, the only way that it is really usable is by governments who want to create fiat premium, i.e. trust us more money by using a mechanism that has been proven in the past in that same way. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about stable coins and stuff in response to another question, but I think it actually points to the fact that the monetary system is changing, but I don't necessarily think that means like if Gabby, if you and I were a government, right, and we wanted to create a paper currency, then yeah, maybe we should stockpile gold. But as a sovereign individual, I don't think that gold is the best mechanism. You like there are better mechanisms. If you're in Australia, then you should be investing in real estate in Australia. It is one of the best wealth building tools you can get on the planet. Bitcoin is more portable, more divisible, more liquid, so that's great. So there's other mechanisms that I think could be better. So
cool. I don't really have an opinion on this, honestly, because I don't think too much about gold and silver. I think if it helps you feel better to own a little bit of gold, then go for it. But I don't think it's, again, I've got no idea, but I don't think it's going to be some massive, huge investment thing. I think there's better ways that you could, if the goal is monetary return, I think there's other asset classes.
But even if it was monetary preservation, right? Even if that was the only goal, you still have to contend with the issues of portability, verifiability, divisibility, all of that kind of stuff. Because let's say that you get $1 million and you buy gold and you bury it in your backyard. Like, what are you going to do with the gold? What are you going to do with the gold? Like, at some point, you're going to need to go and exchange that gold for something else so that you can actually spend it. Because you can't just take a chip off the gold and go spend it down the shops because people don't accept gold. There are mechanisms for you, for example, to like, because do you want to actually take the question off the screen, Gabby?
Yeah.
It would be because I can't see you very well. I feel like I'm talking
Sure.
to a tiny spot. Sorry, what was I saying? So yeah, you still need to exchange. You still need to exchange that for something, right? And so you still need to physically take the gold somewhere else and exchange it for something else. Now, you could argue that, for example, I'll just use Bitcoin as an example, right? Because the hierarchy, just to kind of reiterate for everyone, the hierarchy that I believe, if you live in Australia and you're an Australian tax resident, number one is Australian residential real estate. Number two is Bitcoin. Number three is exponential age technology equities, right? So disruptive technologies, and we can talk about that another time. That's the hierarchy that you should be thinking about investing in. Now, but if we just take Bitcoin as a corollary to gold, now you could argue some places accept payment in Bitcoin, right? So fine. But if I had a friend and I owed him some money, I could easily, and let's say that friend was in Australia and we're here in Thailand, I could easily send him some Bitcoin to pay him back. Easily done. I couldn't do the same thing with gold. If I owed him $100 and I had a block of gold sitting in our vault here, which we don't have, right? So don't come to our house looking for gold. I wouldn't be able to easily send that to my friend to pay him back for the IOU because I'd send him the gold and then he'd have the gold and be like, what does he do with gold and all of that kind of stuff. It's not easy, but I can do that with Bitcoin, right? So that's easy. You can pay for some things in Bitcoin. there are also payment on ramps for crypto where you can actually spend Bitcoin using normal like MasterCard type cards. There's several companies that provide that. They don't do that for gold. So from a practical perspective, I think it's an outdated solution. And I think that the only reason governments are stockpiling it is so they can create a fiat premium type product. So to that degree, that makes sense. But I also don't think that that's the way the world is. We could talk more about currencies. We could talk more about currencies in a minute if you want. Actually, we could go into another question when we talk about that if we want.
Yes. Where is that question?
Peter's question.
Yes. Okay. Oh, it's not on the screen. Live TV. Okay. Question from Peter. Long question. Love it. Is Trump and the Republicans planning to remove the US dollar from being the global reserve currency? Despite what Trump said, if we lost the world standard dollar, that would be like losing a war. Their actions seem to suggest otherwise. Increase in US gold, undermining the Fed, tariffs, bringing manufacturing back, Bitcoin/crypto reserve, ramping up even more debt with the big beautiful bill, and some of Besant's comments on Bretton Woods seem sus. They aren't going to show their hand until they're ready, but perhaps the least painful way out for them is to kill the dollar. Would we see this coming?
So I think, and this kind of plays into the last question, which is why I sort of wanted to bookend them on each other. So currently, the US dollar is the world reserve currency. But if you look at the history of it, right? So back in 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement was put in place where the US dollar was officially made the world's reserve currency. Now that introduced something called Triffin's dilemma. Now Triffin's dilemma. Let me just quickly grab some notes here. So Triffin's dilemma, it basically says that if your currency is the global reserve currency, the world needs you to constantly supply it for trade and reserves. The only way to supply enough currency to the world is to run trade deficits, i.e. you buy more from the world than you sell, and you pay in your currency, i.e. you're exporting dollars, right? And you're importing goods. And over time, those deficits erode your domestic industry and pile on debt, making your currency less stable, right? So that is Triffin's dilemma. So in 1944, the US became the global reserve currency, and that started a period where they've had to contend with Triffin's dilemma, where in order for them to have global currency supremacy, they also had to run trade deficits, which effectively weakened their local economy. Now, at the time, they were on a gold-backed currency. Then in 1971, they went off the gold standard and went to a pure floating fiat. Now, because the US dollar was the global reserve currency, that also meant that every other currency became a floating fiat as well, right? Because everything else has been compared to the US dollar. And in fact, the World Bank and the IMF basically made any country that wanted to participate in the global economic system stop being gold backed. In fact, they forced Switzerland to do it in 1980 something. So it became a floating pure play fiat currency, a trust me money, trust me bro money. Then you could argue that it became the petrodollar and all of that kind of stuff, right? Now, so what's happened over time is that in order for the US dollar to continue to be the world reserve currency, which basically means that as the US Fed has inflated the currency, they have been taxing the world to fund the lifestyle of US citizens, right? So just think about that for a little minute. So just in the same way that if the Australian government prints more dollars, it's stealth taxation on Australian citizens, right? They're effectively taxing you by decreasing your purchasing power. The US has inflated the global reserve currency, and they've been basically taxing 8 billion people on planet Earth to fund the lifestyle of the US citizens, right? Which is pretty crazy. And so, but also simultaneously, they've been hollowing out their industrial manufacturing base and making an overall weaker economy. And this is Triffin's dilemma playing out in real time. So, what is Trump trying to do now? I don't know what Trump's doing whatever Trump's doing, right? I'm not going to pretend.
He hasn't told you.
No,
he didn't tweet at you and tell you.
He didn't. No, I don't know. Maybe he did. But what appears to be happening from my point of view is a couple of things. So it appears that they are trying to combat Triffin's dilemma by seeking to reduce slightly the dominance of the US dollar and bring back the manufacturing base. Now, the problem with that is you can't do it part way. Like you can try and sort of, if you think about it like a spectrum, you can try and feather it back a little bit and be like, oh, we'll be slightly less of the reserve currency. We'll bring back the manufacturing base. We'll run a trade surplus. We'll do that for a little bit and we'll make things a little bit better. And then we'll go back to being the global reserve currency. Problem is that won't work, right? That won't work. You can't go halfway. So you're either all in until you blow up, or you're not all in. And so what I think is going to happen is we'll move to a multipolar world where there's going to be several currencies that are regularly used for international trade. But the thing is, I think about the US dollar as being a protocol. You actually asked me yesterday, gave me really interesting. Was it yesterday or the day before? An interesting question about English. You said, "Hey, with the way the world's going, do you think English will still be the dominant international language?" And I said yes, because it's a protocol and it's become a very widely adopted protocol. You know, you travel anywhere in the world, and the most common connective language is English. It doesn't mean everyone speaks English, but that's the most common connective language, right? So it's typically the menus will be in the local language and in English. Right? If you go to Italy, if you go to Thailand, if you go to, I don't know, India, like it's the connective language, right? And that is because it's a commonly used protocol, it's a shared protocol. And if you think about the US dollar as being a protocol as well, right? That is a protocol that people understand. Now, what I think will happen over the next few years, next decade, whatever, I don't know, pick your timing. I'm not going to prognosticate on the timing. But I think what's going to happen is we'll have several currencies. And rather than having one single reserve currency, we will have other currencies which will start to become stronger and more widely used, particularly in international trade. And we're already starting to see that happen with more countries settling international trade in their own currencies. That's already happening as we speak. And so but I don't think it's going to be absolute. I don't think it's going to be like US dollar or no US dollar. I don't think that's going to be the case. I actually think it's going to be more like something like, the US going from 80 to 90% of all international trade settlements to like 50 to 60% of all international trade settlements. And part of the reason for that, and this goes back to the kind of previous question, thinking about global currencies and how it's going to play out. The reason for that is I think stable coins are going to play a very, very, very big role because the US dollar is such a known protocol, i.e. people understand what a US dollar means, right? They understand if something's priced in US dollars. If I said to you something was 1 crore, you wouldn't know what I'm talking about, right? That's like, I don't know, I think it's like 1,000 Indian rupees or 1,000,000 Indian rupees or something. I don't even know what it is. But if I said, oh yeah, hey, do you want to buy these jeans? They're 1 crore. You'd be like, what the hell's a crore? No, what? I don't know. What? But if I said to you, hey, do you want to buy these jeans? They're $50 US. You would have you would be able to process that in a way that would allow you to understand that transactional relationship. And so if you think about it like a protocol in that sense, stable coins, USDT and USDC stable coins are creating an on-ramp, a global on-ramp for US dollars in a way that has not happened in a very, 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 very long time. It's probably the biggest, most successful thing that could happen to the US dollar, full stop. Because what that is enabling is international, borderless USD demand all over the world, right? Because anyone in the world, you're in Argentina, you can go to blockchain based, crypto based US dollars without having to go down and exchange your Argentinian pesos for US dollars, right? So it's a huge on ramp. Not only that, hilariously, it's treasury backed, not gold backed. So in order to mint one US dollar or one USDC or one USDT stablecoin, they have to buy $1 worth of treasuries, US treasuries. So they create a treasury-backed currency, which is hilarious, right? Because they also become the largest buyer of treasuries. So they create a perpetual bid for treasuries, which is going to help them to fund their deficits, whilst also creating an easier, better, faster, simpler on-ramp for US dollar demand. It's really, really, really fascinating. And so part of Peter's question was also around Scott Bessent and his comments around wanting to be part of a reshaping of a Bretton Woods So he said, with the big beautiful bill and some of Bessett's comments about Bretton Woods, etc. I think that what they're angling for is a reshaping of the global monetary system. But I don't think that means that they're going to destroy the US dollar. What I think that means is that US dollar dominance will still continue, but it won't be US dollar absoluteness. So there'll be other currencies, but the US dollar is going to still be dominant through the mechanism of stable coins, which will become backed by US treasuries. Then the way that they fix the credibility of the US treasuries is by fixing the economy and backing the US economy, right? So, Harpreach said 1 crore is 175,000 AUD. That's okay. Okay, so I don't even know what a crore is, right?
Must be some jeans. There's some good.
There must be some jeans. Yeah. So that's hilarious. So I think that we have a situation where they're trying to position the US dollar to still be the dominant currency, but not the only currency, because they have to actually try and get back some of the manufacturing base. But then they need to be able to restructure the US balance sheet in order to create more credibility in the treasury market, which then backs the stable coins, which creates a fast and simple on ramp and perpetual demand for USD. I mean, I know for me personally, we like when we're in between investments in crypto, I'll exchange it to USDT, right? If I don't want to hold it in something else. Right, because it's kind of like the middle ground. It's like if you were going to sell something and you wanted to, like, all right, what am I going to sell it into? If I wanted to sell some Solana, for example, but I wasn't ready to buy something else, I'd sell it into USDT, which creates demand for USDT, right? It's which is so I kind of think that's how that is playing out. So I think they're trying to thread the needle of bringing back, strengthening the economic base, strengthening the US economy, strengthening faith in the US system, which improves the credibility of the treasuries, and the treasuries become the foundation for the stable coins, and the stable coins become the proliferation of the US dollar on the international stage. So that is what I think about that. Did that make sense?
Fascinating. Yeah. Well, it's all just a big game of chess, right?
Yeah.
All right. Do we want to move on to Rachel's question?
Yeah, let's move on to Rachel's question.
You ready for Rachel's question?
It's a freaking great one, by the way. And again, it's all related.
Freaking great. Hang on.
Yeah.
Well, we're particularly raw today, guys. Here we go. All right, Rachel. I have a question about the latest podcast. If everyone loses their jobs to AI, what will happen to the tax that governments get from income? You mentioned at the end that AU does not currently tax our exports. We don't seem to tax companies that well. So if we displace big numbers of people, then where is all of that money going to come from?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So I don't know that I specifically said we don't tax our exports. That's a very absolute statement, but that's not the point here. The question, the question is, where's the money going to come from? And it's basically going to come from money printing. So technology-driven deflation equals monetary inflation equals hard asset inflation. That's all you really need to know. And so you're absolutely right that the government's tax receipts won't keep up with government spending, and there will be a significant deficit. And that deficit will be funded by more money printing, which is stealth taxation, right? And so they'll be taxing by printing, and that then is how they're going to paper over the cracks. That's effectively the entire thesis, right? Is that technology is going to increase productivity and decrease the need for human labor. GDP will become value creation will become decoupled from capital will become decoupled from labor. Governments that exist on a system of taxing labor in order to fund expenses won't be able to do so, and tax receipts will collapse. At the same time, in order to be able to take care of the population and to continue to fund all of that kind of stuff, they're going to need to either create shitloads of government jobs, which they're just going to have to print money to pay for, or they're just going to have to print money and just pay for stuff. But all roads lead to money printing. Lead to monetary inflation. And based on the quantity theory of money, if you double the amount of money supply in a country, you effectively double the nominal value of the goods, services, and assets in that country specifically. Now, that doesn't mean the money flows equally in all directions. It flows more readily to hard assets, which can preserve capital, over time. So what you'll actually see is you'll see asset price inflation. So what will happen is, just to kind of restate that again, is correct. The government won't be able to collect enough money from tax receipts. They will need to print more and more and more money, directly correlated to the degree of productivity gains. There is going to need to be money printing, because it's directly correlated to the degree of human labor displacement. There's going to need to be money printing, and also deflation, by the way, because governments can't handle deflation. They need inflation because they can't service the debt. And so they'll need to continue to print more and more money to be able to paper over all of those cracks. That is going to devalue the currency. That is going to mean that asset prices in optical terms are going to increase significantly. That is why you should buy real estate in Australia, because that is going to happen, right? Like that's why. So it's what I call the big melt up. Everyone thinks about like there's going to be some crash, like there's going to be some big moment where the whole system explodes and collapses, right? They think about a crash as being everything is going to fall down. Everything is going to go down and fall down, but actually everything is going to fall up. Everything's going to fall up. There's going to be a big upwards crash where everything just seems to go up and up and up and up and up. And we're already in it, by the way. We're already in it. We've been in it since 2020. It's happening now. If you haven't already, go check out the Prosperity Wave thesis. You can get access to that document in the Investor Lab community, and you can read that for yourself. I highly recommend you read it, because it basically lays out exactly where we're at in this whole cycle and where it's going. And basically, we're about halfway through phase one, where it is money printing, and we're currently melting up, and they're going to continue to melt up and devalue the currency all the way through until we get to a new system, because the current system is on its last legs. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're positioning your capital or your money, which is your economic energy, in the right places so you can transport your economic energy safely through time and space. And that is, from my perspective, real estate, Bitcoin, and disruptive technology equities. But basically, yeah, they're going to print more money. That's where it's going to come from, because they can't tax it. And people talk about like taxing AI and stuff like that. I don't think it's going to work. They're just going to print more money.
Yeah, that all roads lead to money printing, right?
Yeah, the only things that you need to know in order to be able to navigate the next few years, like if you zoom out, and this actually had this as an answer to a question we probably won't get to today. The only thing that you really need to know to make sense of everything is that technology-driven deflation equals monetary inflation. Monetary inflation equals hard asset price inflation. That's all you really need to know. It's the simplest thing in the world, right? And there are various ways, and there are various hardness and all of that kind of stuff, right? And you know, there's some other nuance in it, but that's the simplest lens to look at it through. So then it's like, okay, well, and to Matt's point earlier, gold is also going to perform well. That's also a hard asset, right? So, you know, great if you want to buy gold, like buy gold, like if that's what you feel comfortable doing. Like I'm not anti-gold. I think gold's good. I just think there's other stuff that I would personally prefer. And so really you've got to look at it and go, okay, what hard assets do I want to own? And why do I want to own those assets? And people would argue, for example, that you know, shares are not hard assets. There's an argument that they both are and aren't, because at the whim of a board of directors, a company can just issue more shares, and that is true. But also, what can happen with things like gold is they can suddenly find more gold reserves. There was a massive gold reserve found in Africa last year. You know, so new supply of hard assets can still come onto the market, but in a general sense, you know, you are still buying a fairly fixed or controlled supply mechanism. Residential real estate in Australia is so freaking sick, because the system is so broken that the level of brokenness of the system is directly linked to the success of real estate. And we're going to be doing a few more episodes on real estate stuff over the next couple of weeks. I've got a few ideas of things that I want to talk about as well. But yeah, hard assets is the way to go. That's the only way you're going to preserve your economic energy, to be able to transport it through time and space, and then just choose the right one. So
cool.
Sweet.
We can probably do one more question.
Okay.
Do you have a preference?
Let me have a little look. What have we got here? Oh, Gavin's question. Yeah, I want to talk about Gavin's question.
Great. All right, that's me. That's my cube.
That's your cube.
Silence.
Talk about it then.
Go
By the
for
way,
it.
hey Charlie, nice to see you too.
Hey,
So,
Charlie. Okay. Gavin, perhaps a rookie question, but here goes. Are the days of positively geared properties at the time of purchase gone without putting in a huge deposit, having a low LVR, or waiting a few years for rents to catch up?
such a good question, and the answer is both yes and no. It's both yes and no. But it's a really pertinent question, and so like primarily I'm going to be saying yes, right? That being
Mhm.
said, you can definitely buy cash flow positive properties. Like if the only measurement of success was can I buy a cash flow positive property or a
Mm.
positively geared property from day one, I could find you one in probably less than 15 minutes on realestate.com.au.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that it's going to be a good property. In fact, 99 times out of 100, it's probably not going to be an asset that you're going to want to buy, right? Because just because it's going to be positively geared doesn't mean that it is good. That is not the only metric that you should be assessing the asset through. So yes, you can still buy properties that are cash flow positive or positively geared, but are they strategically aligned to actually what is going to progress you for this invest in your portfolio? Almost certainly, from my observations and from the team's observations and stuff, we're buying a lot of properties, right, every month, right? And we're you know, if you could buy cash flow positive properties at the point of purchase in the current environment and also get the growth and also get all the other characteristics and also buy the right markets, we'd be doing it. We'd be 100% doing it. But I could definitely find you a cash flow positive property. Yeah, in about, I don't know, maybe give him 15 minutes and I could find one for you. But it doesn't make it a good property to purchase, right? You need a strategy, you need a plan.
Mhm.
So some of the trade-offs would be that you'd be buying a property with potentially low growth characteristics, maybe low quality, maybe in an undesirable area, maybe an undesirable asset or a non-standard asset. So you can buy things like rooming houses and things like that. But what's interesting is they often have like a very limited resale market, which is really interesting. I actually met someone who had five rooming houses, and the problem is he couldn't sell any of them. He couldn't find any
Mm.
buyers. It's crazy. And also they don't produce as much cash flow as you think net of all of the costs. So they're not often as good as many people think. So in general, the assessment is correct. The question is, are the days of positively geared properties at the time of purchase gone without putting a huge deposit, having a low LVR, or waiting a few years for rents to catch up? And in general, that is correct, but it's not a new thing. In October 2021, we made a podcast called The Death of Cash Flow.
2021.
Yeah, October 2021.
I
That
remember
because
that.
that was
Yeah.
because I remember doing it because our whole
Mhm.
catch cry had been cash flow positive properties in high growth areas with value add potential. Now the value add potential, we realized you didn't need to do that if you just got if you got the other two, got the location selection right.
Mhm.
But I remember doing that episode because we'd always talked about cash flow positive properties, and it was like, oh, things are changing. Things are changing, and so what is happening is asset prices are rising faster than rents are rising. And that is because of monetary debasement, and it's also because wages are not keeping up, and that is because of technology-based productivity deflation, right? So technology is suppressing wages because people can't demand higher wages when there's more technology that could do the work, and asset prices are increasing because they're printing more money, et cetera, et cetera. So those two things are bifurcating at an increasing rate, and rents are a function of what people can afford in a free market to be able to pay to be able to rent their property, right? So what we're seeing generally is yields are trending down over time. That's been true for a very long time, by the way. So yields are trending down over time. Prices are trending up over time. So necessarily the opportunity to get cash flow positive properties is significantly diminished. Now, that being said, if interest rates were to collapse by several percent, then that would change a little bit, right? Because the interest expense is actually the highest expense in holding a property. And so if interest rates were to come down 2 or 3%, right, then that might be different. So we'd see. But as it stands right now today, yeah, if you want to get, yeah, you can absolutely get. You can either buy basically a shit property, right? A shit property, a weird property, or put down a very large deposit to lower your LVR, and that's how you can get cash flow positive. But it's very important for people to understand that, right? And now, there are ways to manage cash flow, and we've covered those in previous episodes. There's some really great content, if you just go back a couple of episodes, on how to manage cash flow in your property portfolio. And as rents go up over time, yes, you do end up producing cash flow in your portfolio. But we're talking about at the point of purchase. And if your only measurement of success is I'm going to buy a property that's going to be cash flow positive at the point of purchase, you're going to either force yourself to make substandard decisions or you're going to be severely disappointed. That's what I would say.
Boom.
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 Nice. Sweet. Okay. Well, what do you want to cover next? Do you want to cover anything else? Or
up to you. Do you want to do another
one? Let's see. I think we can squeeze one more in. Which one would you cover if you wanted to cover one more?
I mean, we can quickly touch on Beck's question.
Oh yeah, Beck's question is an interesting and quick one. So Beck asked, and Gabby's just going to bring it up. Beck asked, "Hi team, this is basic, but I still want to know what platform do you use to purchase Bitcoin?" Now, the reference point for this question is a lot of people have issues investing in crypto or Bitcoin, and Bitcoin and crypto are two different things. Because their banks don't let them transfer the amount of money they want to transfer, or they either don't let them do it at all or have significant capital controls, which I think is gross overreach of those organizations. So the question is like, how do you do it? Now, we're going to make specific platform recommendations other than to say that one of the structures or one of the mechanisms that we found worked well was if you set up a company structure using a platform called Independent Reserve. Because as a company, the kind of expectation is that your transaction volumes are going to be higher and all of that kind of stuff. So if you're able to, if you have a company, then you could set up an Independent Reserve account for your business, and then you could buy Bitcoin or whatever you like through your business, and then you could pay yourself in Bitcoin. That would be totally fine, and then you're effectively bypassing the banking structure. If you're an individual, you could still set up a contractor arrangement with your work, or there's a variety of different ways you could do it. But in Australia, we found Independent Reserve to be a really good platform to use. It's not one of the kind of like major retail ones. It's actually more set up for high net worths and companies. And so, and we haven't seen any issues with transferring large volumes of capital either on or off Independent Reserve as a platform. So we found that to be useful. Gabby, have you got anything to add to that?
Like I think I'll comment on Independent Reserve actually specifically, because I think as an individual, one of their payment, because like you said, the biggest challenge is actually getting the money into the platform out of your bank. So any of the platforms will do the function of helping you to buy Bitcoin. Independent Reserve, I have experience being helpful because you can transfer money into it using Pay ID. So like, you know how you can get a unique email address that you can transfer using instead of putting in the BSB and the account number, which is usually what can help it get flagged. It may not work all the time, but in what I've researched and experienced, it can help with that if you're using Pay ID. I don't know if the other platforms do that. And then I guess it's also just like crypto/Bitcoin friendly banks. From memory right now, it would be St. George and ING from memory are pretty crypto friendly as amongst like the more popular banks. But yeah, any of them are going to do the trick. It's just about finding the right structure. It's one thing to keep in mind as well with Bitcoin. It's because it is still currently treated as an asset to the ATO. So any gains that you would make if you sold technically would be treated as capital gain, and you would have to pay
or
CBT.
Income.
What do you mean?
Well, if you're trading.
If you're trading, yes. Yeah.
If you're like day trading or doing something like that, then the buying and selling that gets treated as income, PAYG income. So yeah, you got to be really careful with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's just being mindful of like if you're planning to. It's the same as a property. Like if you're planning to buy something with the intention of maybe selling it in a couple of years, just be mindful that right now it is still treated as an asset versus a currency. And so you'll need to pay CGT on it if you're an Australian tax resident. Solutions for that would be like just hodl it, just continue to hold it and only sell if shit that hits the fan, basically.
Yeah.
Like think of it like your family home or something. Like, you have this asset that if you absolutely had to, you could liquidate it, but don't think of it as this like high volume trading thing unless that's what you want to do. Um, and then, yeah, alternatively, you can set up other structures that can help you to do that. Or if you became a non tax resident in Australia, you could do that in other jurisdictions and get better access better tax systems there that have less CGT. And but that's a whole
Yeah.
other mission to go down.
Yeah. Even just on ramping as well, you could even look at setting up an international bank account. So, for example, like even as an Australian resident, I'm pretty sure you can set up a bank account in Singapore. So you could potentially set up a bank account in Singapore, and maybe that would give you better on ramp capability as well.
Yep.
Just a thought, a couple of questions here in the chat. Let's tackle those before we wrap up, I think. Josh McMillan, he said, thoughts on CBDs likely to be enforced globally within 5 to 10 years. This is why you need to have your own money. This is why you need to be in control, right? So it's super interesting, right? So I have a lot of respect for China. I have a lot of respect for China. I think that they play a very long-term game. And I think that if you really look at, like, if you just look at what they're doing in terms of like solar and all of this kind of stuff, right? Like, it's crazy. You know, they're able to just decide to do things and just do it, right? So I have a lot of respect for China, but I don't want to be part of China's economic system, because they have effectively a CBDC, right? And like social credit scoring and all of that kind of stuff. And it's really crazy when you do the research on it, because, like, there's people that can't buy food and can't get on planes and can't do all this kind of stuff because their social credit score has dropped because the CCTV around the streets saw them jaywalking, and so they lost points and all that. It is full Black Mirror shit, right? It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I think that CBDCs are a terrible idea. I think they are an abuse of personal freedom in almost every single way. What I find interesting is that the US has taken a very strong position that they are anti-CBDC. Very strong position that they're anti-CBDC. And that, I think, is also why that they are aggressively supporting stablecoins, because stablecoins can proliferate the US dollar, and it also puts an intermediary in place in between the government and the money. So, sure, the governments could maybe proxy control Circle or Tether or something. I don't think they will, right? I think the point is they're saying, actually, the money's somebody else. Somebody else is running Tether and somebody else is running Circle, and that's cool. And everyone's going to use US dollars. And I think they actually, I'm not sure, but there was some kind of like policy they put in place that the US will not, or will ban or whatever, or not produce CBDC. So they took a very strong official political point of view that they will not have a CBDC in the US, which I think is super interesting. There's obviously talk of CBDCs in Australia. Christine Lagarde has said that they're going to launch a CBDC in the EU. I think real soon. I can't remember the date, but I think it's real soon. It could be in the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months. And so I think they're really bad. And I think that where the world is going is that we will have multiple currencies that you can choose to use. Like, you can use the yuan right now, and you could potentially use the EU CBDC if that's what you want to use or whatever. But we'll have these choices around what currencies we use. And so what you want to do is you want to position yourself to be in control of your money. I think it's really, really, really important. Now, there's several ways that you can think about doing that, and that is owning real world hard assets, because that actually allows, like, no one can turn your house into a CBDC, right? If you own an investment property, they can't turn it into a CBDC. If you have cash sitting in the bank, maybe that becomes a CBDC, but then maybe they just seize it, right? So Bitcoin is decentralized and secure, so that also is CBDC resistant. So there's different ways you can think about protecting yourself from a CBDC kind of world. And I think that individual sovereignty is critically important as we move forward into the next phase of our society. And I think that is why we do all of this. That is why it's important to invest in assets that are going to help you to accelerate your wealth. That is why it's important to be self-sovereign in your assets and your control. And that is why you need to make sure you're positioning yourself to not be at the behest of what a government tells you must do. So I don't know that they will be able to enforce CBDCs globally within the next 5 to 10 years. I think there will be some protagonists that will try and proliferate them significantly, but I also think a lot of people will just choose not to use them, and they'll choose other currencies. And that free market of currencies will actually enable things to work. Let's just say, for example, that the Thai baht was the only currency in the world that wasn't a CBDC. Well, how many people who cared about freedom would suddenly want to buy Thai baht and trade and transact in Thai baht? Like that aspect. Like, so it's kind of like if you had a petrol car and an electric car, some people are going to want the electric car and some people are going to want the petrol car. That free market demand, like those different characteristics of the money, will actually give people the choice of like, well, what money do I want to use, and why would I want to use that kind of money? Is that a why don't I want to own Argentinian pesos? It's like because they inflate like crazy, or like Nigerian lira, like because they inflate like crazy. So I don't want to own those because they have those characteristics. Why wouldn't I want to own an EU CBDC? Because I don't want to be part of that kind of a system. Fine. So you can choose, and I think that's what it's going to create, is a more of a free market for currencies. I also think that's strategically why the US has taken a position of being anti-CBDC, and why they've passed the Genius Act to onshore and proliferate and strengthen the stablecoin market. I think stablecoins are probably the biggest financial revolution in the last, probably since Bretton Woods, to be honest, right? I think they're significantly underpaid. They're not just like this, like, oh yeah, it's cute, you've got cryptocurrency US dollars. It's actually a fundamental replumbing of the global monetary system, which is really, really interesting. So I think the Genius Act that passed recently that supports that, I think is really powerful. So I think that people will have a choice, and I think free markets decide at the end of the day. So, and I also think, by the way, that by and large, governments are going to want to avoid hot conflicts. And so there may be cold conflicts, but I think what they're going to try and do is position much more around getting people to opt in to certain things. So that's my point of view.
Cool.
Sweet. Awesome.
This has been fun.
It's been great. Super. I really enjoyed it. Actually, we should do more of these. I think the questions have been great. There was a few that we didn't get to that we would have liked to have gotten to, but I think we got to some really, really good ones. So I would like to do more of these episodes, maybe every 4 to 6 weeks or something like that, because I think it's a great way to kind of get some kind of ideas on the table. If you want to be able to participate and to submit questions for the next AMA or Ask Us Anything that we do, please join the community and post questions in there, because that's where we're going to get them from. And also you get access to a great community of people just like you that are seeking a life of freedom, choice, and abundance. So I think this has been a great episode, Gabby.
Yeah, I love it, because these questions, obviously, they've come up for you and I to answer and to talk about on this show, specifically what we asked for. But what usually happens is that someone in the community will raise a question, and then other people in the community will give their opinions and help each other out. Like, it's pretty awesome. And a couple of the comments I've seen come through, it's just like how cool it is to have this space online full of these like-minded people just being able to talk about these kind of things. Because you think like it's you and I, but it's also, I think it's nearly 150 people in there now of just similar values. So if you have similar values to us, if you enjoy conversations that we have, just imagine that in your pocket, basically, with heaps of other people around Australia and living overseas, and everything that you can connect with and build your own community that way as well. So I will chuck the link below. We will see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.